I had a discussion with somebody with this last night. We were watching a clip of when Elon Musk was on the Joe Rogan show and talking about the rise of artificial intelligence. And I was like, the data that people that companies see, this is my question. I want to ask you who you think these people are. When we're cataloging our lives on social media and then our phone calls, everything like that, there are people that are basically, like you said, getting data of like, who you like to sleep or whatever. Who are the people that are getting this information, and what is the purpose in the end game, do you think, of basically knowing what every single person, like as many people as you can, knowing everything about them? Who are the people that you think are trying to do this, and what do you think the goal is?
It's money, brother. Who are the people that are trying to do it? It's Facebook, it's Google, it's any number of other people that are, scraping data off devices or buying data. It's everybody. But I think the main harvesters, if you will, the real farmers, the guy that grow the stuff and create the product so they can distribute it out into the market, meaning your information and your data, are Google and Facebook and Twitter, the three biggest ones. And the end game is it's always the same end game. It's power and money. They're going to sell that information to politicians for power, and they're going to sell it to anybody that will sell anything, anybody that's in the business of selling shit.
I'll give you
market to you.
I'll give you a good example, D.I. Facebook didn't know how to monetize. They weren't making any money, so they went with this. And it might have been Cambridge Analytica, but there's basically companies that's all they do. They just collect information on you. You don't even know who they are. And so they sold all this information to Facebook, and then Facebook now knew, like Eric said, what cornflakes you liked or what. And so they were like, guess what? Advertisers. We have, almost 1 billion people that are using this product, and so many will buy your cornflakes, so many will buy, and that's how they started to make money. And when people found out that their personal information had been sold to fucking Facebook and Google, they just flipped. That's why Zuckerberg had to go testify in front of Congress, right?
I mean, I think Zuckerberg, I don't know. Maybe it's because he looks like such a freaking dweeb. He's the goofiest looking cocksucker that's ever been the most powerful person on the planet, I think, in history of time. But I think the motherfucker's evil. I don't trust this guy. What is he, 12 or 40 or something? And he's grown up in this little bubble that he's created for himself since college. And he's got way too much power. Way too much power. I can't imagine for the life of me that the U.S. government, at some point soon, isn't going to impose publisher regulations on platforms like Facebook and Twitter. Right now, they're platforms. They're not considered publishers. And as a platform, you get all kinds of wide open, free range to roam. But if you're a publisher, shit changes quickly, and the responsibility you have becomes much different. And I think we're getting to that tipping point now where it's going to be a bipartisan thing. Everybody is going to get behind making Twitter, Facebook, a little bit more responsible and accountable.
1,000%.
Hey,
1,000%.
So like every day when
they were very irresponsible. What day?
Every day I go to the gym. I listen to Ben Shapiro. It's like a 55 to 1 hour minute podcast. I listen to him. I watch Bill Maher, and basically sometimes I get in these YouTube rabbit holes where like you just if there's a topic, it's everything. So I'm kind of it's kind of funny how I don't consider myself like this big right winger, but like it's kind of weird how like the goalposts have been shifted by like other people that like people basically label you. Who are like, where are you developing your ideology from? Like who are like your go-to people that like you like to listen to that you think are like maybe like the smartest people in the room that you get your stuff from?
I don't hang my. Before I say this, if you've ever listened to Tucker Carlson, Tucker Carlson to me is like he's the independent's independent. Mm-hmm. I like the way he thinks. I like the way he breaks down issues and positions. So I do check him out frequently, not religiously, but frequently. But beyond that, I get my news. I force myself. to get my news from a couple different sources. Now, I spend a lot of time in my truck, I'm driving around with my dog and just doing stuff I do here in Wyoming. And I listen to PBS. And I get most of my news from, during the day, I'll get most of my news from public broadcasting systems. A lot of that news comes from the BBC. They have a lot of relationships with BBC. So I'll listen to that news. And look, I recognize it for what it is. It is a more liberal source of news than one might normally find, for example, on Fox or something like that. But it's a thoughtful discourse. It's an educated conversation. They dig into the issues and make you think about them, as opposed to giving you 3-minute topical arguments and then moving on to a new argument with people yelling at each other. Right. And I mean, you know what I mean? I like the format of PBS because they'll discuss one topic for 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. Brexit is something that comes up a lot when I'm listening to the news on PBS, especially because they get a lot of their stuff from the BBC. And right now, Brexit and the BBC is probably the biggest thing that's happened in that country since 1776. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on over there, politically, culturally, ethnically. So I'm fascinated by how that's affecting the culture and the process. So I get a lot of my news from there. But when I get home at night, I'll drop into Tucker Carlson for a while. But then I force myself to get away from it. Now, during the day, if I'm driving around and I look at my Twitter feed, I get my news from all kinds of different people. But I try to balance it so that it's not all coming from one direction. And even though I'm an independent that leans conservative, I don't listen exclusively to Fox News. When Bill Barr's report came out, okay, and when the Mueller investigation came out, the redacted version of it, I sat and watched back and forth between MSNBC and Fox, probably like wrestling fans did during Monday Night Wars. Boom, 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 boom. I had two TVs going. And it was because I like to analyze the way the information is being presented to me.
Yeah, that's the way, because you know what, I know the thing is when I consume this stuff, I know I'm getting the narratives. But even if it's coming from the place, you still get nuggets of information that you say hey, that makes good sense. And so it's you have to consume a lot to build your ideology. And it's just it's fun. It's funny that it's hard to share this with people. Because your friends and stuff, everything, and your friends, they're talking politics, and you try to get in the discussion, and they're liberals, and they just start calling you names and stuff and everything. It's kind of frustrating that we're at a place where you're right. It's so competitive that we just can't sit and go have dinner and talk politics, because if we start talking politics, that we'll start escalating our conversation to start arguing with each other. And I don't know. You're right. I see the ideological civil war as the next step, and it's because people are just refusing to engage. And I think it's a shame,
And I think, go ahead, Eric.
No, I was just saying I agree.
Yeah, and I just think that even what we said, even though we don't know where the embryonic situations with this political divisiveness that we're in started, I'm thinking back then maybe of Watergate. But the one thing that I think we can all agree on is, and I am apolitical, is that, Trump, who's been so divisive, just capitalized on it. Because that was, I was talking about this before the show. I think here in the United States, the white male just felt like nobody was speaking out for him anymore. They were talking about Latinos, they were talking about women, they were talking about gays, they were talking about transgender, they were talking about everything but the white male. And it's almost like he felt left out and Trump was talking to him. You know what I'm saying? And I just think that he's exacerbated the whole thing.
I mean, there's two schools of thought. I mean, I can tell you, if I went back in my Twitter feed long enough, if I haven't deleted it, I was not a big fan. I didn't vote for Obama in, when was it, 2012, when he got elected, or whatever it was, 2008.
2008, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I didn't vote for him, but shortly after 2008, I posted something to the effect that said, I may not have voted for candidate Obama, but I have a very good feeling about President Obama. And I was pretty open-minded and optimistic until, I know this is an obscure incident and it shouldn't mean that much, but it was indicative of me of what we were in for. But when the Cambridge, Massachusetts professor, who was an African-American, had trouble getting into his home, and then some local police stopped him and questioned him, and then it turned into an escalated.
Yeah, he was a Harvard professor, I think, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That escalated to something it shouldn't have, because I think both parties were probably wrong. I think the cops were probably too aggressive, and I think the guy, that was being offended that the cops were protecting his home was probably stepping over the line just a bit. It was a bad situation. But rather than just letting it die, Obama turned it into a moment by calling the police stupid without any information. They were automatically guilty of being stupid, and turned it into a beer summit. Now, the beer summit was cool. I get it. It's a great way to make chicken salad out of chicken shit. But when you start immediately as a president of the United States picking sides, good and bad, based on ideology or race in this case, you're lighting the fire. And I think it only began to escalate from there. And I think it continues, to your point, Conan, of escalating to this day. But
I think in fairness, but Eric, let me just hold you on right there. I think in fairness, Obama could have capitalized on a lot worse situations that happened during his presidency. And and I think he was very thoughtful and gracious and held back what he really probably thought. Which in that case of the Harvard professor, I think he let his guard down and said, and got people mad. But I think for the 8 years that he was in and all the shit he went through and all the shit that he saw that he could have talked about and made it a racial issue, he never did. Would we give him credit for that?
In general, sure. Specifically, I'm not sure, we'd have to look at one of those points, one of those things that happened that he didn't capitalize on.
Right. Police brutality and stuff like that.
Well, police brutalities, look, Conan, you grew up in a tougher situation than I did, but we both grew up in situations that were less than ideal. I grew up in Detroit during the riots of the 1960s. I'm pretty, I grew up in it. I didn't just read about it or watch it on TV. It was part of my childhood growing up. So we're all aware that it's happened throughout our history. Question is, what do you do with it? How do you fix it? How do you not exploit it for political reasons? And I think that's where we started falling apart a little bit. And I, again, agree there. I think it's still happening to this day, unfortunately.
Let me ask you a question. If we don't get Trump and a Democrat wins, who wouldn't you mind?
Oh, gosh, I haven't thought about that.
I have, because I'm like, because the thing is, like, we lived through 8 years of Obama, and it wasn't like the country wasn't toxic like it is now. I wouldn't mind if we had a Democrat that would kind of like would bring us as a country back, maybe to like not arguing with each other as much, not throwing gasoline on the fire. Like who do you think that would be?
Well, that would be Joe Biden.
Right. So as I said, me too. I thought Mayor Pete and Joe Biden are the two guys I look like. They don't seem like they're nuts. They kind of just be there, and because the president doesn't like affect everybody's daily life every day. We when he tweets,
this guy has,
and the way that we're engaged on social media because the guy, because we're all talking about the guy. But bottom line is, ultimately, how does it affect my checks? My taxes. That's all I really care about with the president. Basically, is with my income and what I do, just how much more or less am I going to pay in taxes each year based on who gets in the office? Because with my job and my daily routine and my daily life, the president doesn't affect me that much. But so I wouldn't mind Joe Biden and I wouldn't mind Mayor Pete, but these other ones, I'm like, they just seem like they want to just, change things and, I don't know. I just, that's the way I look at it. But you haven't really thought about it, have you?
It's hard not to like Joe Biden. He's a lovable dude. He's a gaffe machine. He says a lot of stupid shit. Just recently in front of a bunch of people, he came out and said, "Come on, man." Like he's all of a sudden he's like Texas or something. Yeah. Right? Fucking grew up in Delaware. Come on. Yeah. Come on, man. Yeah. China's not, they can't compete with that. Why you eat their lunch? I'm going, who the fuck are you, man? Right. This is not stand up in some corner fucking bar in the middle of an off-strip joint in Vegas. China's not a competitor. Right. And he says that stupid shit that makes me fall out of love with him a little bit. I'm agreeing with you, though. Intellectually, Worldview-wise, Mayor Pete. I mean, he checks all the boxes. Yeah. And if you're going to put the country in the trust of one person, even though they've got a Senate and a Congress and checks and balances, but if there's one person sitting in that White House, I kind of want it to be one of the smartest motherfuckers on the list.
Absolutely. That's the way I look at it. And we're going, it's coming soon. How long we've waited? A year and a half now, right?
The third and final part of the Keeping It 100 with Conan discussion with Eric Bischoff will air on next week's episode. But for now, if you want to hear the entire hour-long discussion without any edits and completely uncensored, you can check that out on the Patreon site at patreon.com/Conan or Conan.me.